Hello, everybody. Welcome to HBL, and today I'm going to give a lecture on social policies in Nazi Germany. So just look at your lesson 3 notes and look at pages 10. So I'm going to cover from pages 10 to 13. Now, when we think about social policies, IB has defined it as such. So there's education or youth policies, religion, women and family, and minorities. So all these encompass social policies. But for today's lesson, we are just going to focus on education and youth policies. Now, basically, what are the aims Nazi had for both boys and girls? You can read the slides. There are a few aims that are quite generic and quite common. Be obedient, to idolize the Führer, in some sense to support the cult of personality. They are to be physically fit because if they are fit, then they can sacrifice their individual self for the national good. Do everything to strengthen the health and racial purity of the German nation. And really, in some sense, of course, the Nazi believed strongly in the Aryan race, right, the supremacy of the Aryan race. And so there's a need to purify the nation and to rid Germany from, undesirable elements like the Jews, the Gypsies, and even those who are mentally ill. Now, boys are to be strong fighters because to prepare for war, and girls are to bear many children because they are supposed to be mothers. And of course, you have more kids, and if your children are pure Aryan race, that will be good for society. Now, Nazi youth organizations. At every level, there were uniforms, there were competitions, expeditions, sports, musical activities. They also watched theater. And so the youth did take part in a lot of physical activities. Now, this is the head of the so-called the youth in Nazi Germany, Baidu von Schricker, I think his name. Yeah. So is the man over here. So he was the leader of the youths, all the youths in Germany. Now, when you think about the boys, actually, all of us are familiar with the Hitler Youth, but there's actually different organizations. We have CUPS for 6 to 10, we have Youth German Boys 10 to 14, and of course the Hitler Youth, you can see range, they're like, the secondary school kind of level from 14 to about 18. So here are some pictures of the youths giving the salute to Hitler. Then we have the girls. The girls also divided into different so-called organizations, right, for different ages. And these are the so-called the women, the ladies. Now, let's focus on the Hitler Youth, which is for the boys. Great stress on political indoctrination, so emphasizing the life and achievement of Hitler. Of course, there's also this idea of, you need to be patriotic to the nation. And of course, a lot of emphasis on athletics because we want the boys to be fit and later on can go to war. Youths were also encouraged to spy on their parents. So they told the youths, if you sense that your parents are not so loyal to the Nazi regime, you are supposed to report to the Nazis. By 1939, the Hitler Youth was made compulsory, and many parents were pressured to enroll their children into the Hitler Youth. Now, what are some of the results of the Hitler Youth? Well, in many ways, the Hitler Youth was one of the most successful Nazi mass movements. In general, quite well received by the young people because, even those who are from the poor backgrounds can participate in the Hitler Youth. And they, in some sense, if they do well, they can be made prominent and rise up the ranks. And many of the boys did join the Hitler Youth because they were attracted by the adventurous activities. So membership did increase in 34 and then moved on to around 6 million in 36. So remember, this was not compulsory yet. So in some sense, I believe that there were people who were quite genuine and quite excited to join the Hitler Youth. By 38, 77.2% of German youths aged 10 to 18 were in this movement. And because the Hitler Youth was so popular, basically the Catholic youth groups finally closed down by 39, and also in some sense were made by the Nazis to close down the Catholic youth groups. And so you can see from then onwards, the young boys were in some sense really indoctrinated by the Nazi regime. Now, but at the same time, there were some flaws and limitations. As you know, the Hitler Youth expanded, but once you expand, it also means that you must have enough leaders to engage the youths. And if you have not enough leaders to engage the youth, then the activities may not be so well planned. So in the end, as the Hitler Youth expanded, leadership was quite inadequate. And in fact, some of the leaders also were aging. And later on in 39, when it was made compulsory, what happens was they are forcing a lot of teenagers who are unwilling to join the Hitler Youth. And so many of them will become very bored with drills and badly organized games. And when World War II started in 1939, it became more difficult to run the Hitler Youth. And there was an increased emphasis on discipline. But once you increase discipline, of course, the youth will also resent this harsh discipline. Now, another limitation or flaw is that while, the boys move to the Hitler Youth and participate in all these adventures, right, it did lower academic standards because now you're taking the students out from lessons. And they could withdraw from school as much as 2.5 days a week so basically, naturally, your academic studies will suffer. And employers and armed forces did begin to register that because of the Hitler Youth, there's a decline in pupils' knowledge. Now, what were some of the results? Were all the youth supportive of the regime? Like all young people, obviously there are some young people who will not like the regimentation. And of course, a group of them would then form illegal youth groups. So I think you learned the last time, some of them, if they like Western music, will form groups that do dance to American songs. So there were illegal youth groups that were formed. All right, the working class will gravitate towards the Edelweiss Pirates, and the middle and upper class will move towards the swing movement. And although membership was compulsory, of course, many young people will try to avoid it. And so it's not that, please do not get the idea that everybody is super loyal towards the Hitler Youth. Now, let's move on to schools. Now, if you look at the aims for the education system, and you turn to page 10 of your notes, you will realize that it says in the official manual for the teachers, it states that the chief purpose of school is to train human beings to realize that the state is more important than the individual, and that individuals must be willing and ready to sacrifice themselves for the nation and for the Führer, which is for Hitler. So you can see that there's a huge emphasis, really the idea that the young people must be loyal towards the Nazi regime. And of course, the young people will be indoctrinated with Nazi ideology and principles and ethos. Now, Bernhard Rust, this was in some sense, you can argue he was the Minister of Education. So he was the right Minister for Science, Education, and Culture. And he really tried to centralize and control the education system. So what are some things that they try to centralize and control? So they try to control all textbooks. And basically, these textbooks must reflect Nazi values. Religious education downgraded. And when you think about key subjects like biology, history, and German, it was very easy for these subjects to convey certain Nazi philosophy or Nazi ideology. Racial science also became a compulsory subject in 1933, and in some sense, racial science would promote the idea that there's the superiority of the Aryan race, and then there are, of course, the races that are less superior and need to be exterminated. By 1939, all the private or the elementary schools that had religious elements in it were abolished. And between the ages 6 and 14, German children were legally obliged to attend state primary schools. Now, if you look at this photograph here, what do you think is happening here in schools? All right, so the boys obviously are taught boxing in preparation for war. And so this is something that was quite compulsory within the curriculum. So greater stress was put on physical exercise, which by 36 took up at least 2 hours a day. And sports was meant to produce, according to Hitler, bodies which are healthy to the core and capable of physical contribution to the nation, whether in the field of reproduction of military service. Now, I think even when you look at Singapore, sports are so important. Why? Because we also want to ensure that our young men are ready for national service. So I think this is something, all states try to promote, because we want boys and girls to have a healthy lifestyle. But I think in terms of for the Nazis, of course, there's really a huge emphasis on this, and because they were really gearing up for war. Now, for the ladies, what do you think is happening here in the Nazi school, where a teacher is teaching a young lady? Well, basically, it's how to spot a iron, right? Basically, the young lady needs to know that if she was to get married, she can only marry an iron person, so that basically the children will be of iron descent. So history subjects basically promote the greatness of Germany's past, to talk about the evils of the Weimar Republic and the dangers of communism. So history, in some sense, the narrative will be slanted towards promoting Nazism. In biology, basically race and eugenics will be promoted, and social Darwinism, the idea of natural selection, will be promoted, and of course the elimination of the inferior race, which threatens the purity of the iron race. And through biology, the emphasis really is that we need to increase birth rates. So the idea that we need to have more children. So in schools, you can see these things are being taught in schools as well. And obviously, the ladies are taught how to take care of children. Other things that occur in girls' education, needlework, music, home crafts, all these so-called subjects and topics that help the ladies to become good homemakers and mothers. And of course, there's a marked reduction in number of girls in grammar schools, basically in private schools, because now they want to encourage the girls to go to state schools. Then, of course, within the schools, there was harsh treatment towards the Jews. So a law was passed in 1933 against the overcrowding of German schools and universities, to ensure that the number of Jewish school children in any one institution did not exceed 1.5%. And of course, there was discrimination. So Jews, the children were asked to sit at separate desks, and during break time, they're not supposed to interact with the other German children. So racism and discrimination occurring in schools. Now, then we move on to this idea of the elite schools. And when you think about elite schools, there are three: the NAPOLAs, which are the National Political Institute of Education. Then we have the Adolf Hitler schools and the Castle of Orders. So for the NAPOLAs, basically it was for boys, all right, for boys aged between 10 to 18, and they were supposed to be developed to become future leaders. And they focus on the rural community, because they want to see whether or not within the rural community can we recruit some boys with potential. And later on in 1936, the NAPOLAs were taken over by the SS, and there are about 21 NAPOLAs by 1938 and 39 by 1943. And of course, the education was quite military style in nature. They stayed in boarding schools, okay, and their classes are even called platoons. And so there's an atmosphere of like a military camp, because really we want to prepare the boys for military service. Then we have the Adolf Hitler schools. Basically, they were set up in rival, kind of like a competition against the NAPOLA schools. And free boarding for 12 to 18-year-old. And again, some of these boys were selected mainly on grounds of physical appearances and leadership potential. And of course, there was military training within these Adolf Hitler schools. Then there was what we call the Castle of Orders. And the so-called the boys were actually housed in medieval castles. Okay, again, these so-called schools were training future political and military leaders. So if you look at this photograph, what can you learn from this photograph of the Nepolas? You can see here actually what they're learning is, how to fire an artillery. Okay, so even for myself, when I was in army, I also had to learn how to fire an artillery. I need to call the artillery officer how to fire. Basically, I was trained to, in some sense, be a forward observer, and then to give, the mathematical formula of, the trajectory of the missile so that the missile can hit the target. So science, physics does play a role when you think about artillery. Again, if you look at this photograph, this is a photograph about the Adolf Hitler schools. They need to make their beds, they need to stand by bed. So basically, all this kind of discipline, military discipline, were instilled in these schools. Now, what were some of the results for education policies in schools? Well, because there was a huge emphasis on, adventure, military training, sports, all that, the traditional academic subjects suffered by the early years of the war. Okay, basically, some people even noticed that the education standards begin to fall. The students are not that strong in terms of the academic wise. Now, for the elite schools, they failed to produce a new Nazi elite because when you think about universities, the universities were still seen as places whereby you can get good careers. So it's not like these schools replace the universities. I think a lot of people still desire to go to the universities because they know that that's where the real, sometimes education takes place. Now, but at the same time, when you think about the fact of the loyalty of the young people, then maybe there is some truth in the fact that the indoctrination worked because millions of young people were willing to fight for the Nazi cause, and when World War II broke out, they were willing to go to war and fight. So it does suggest some degree of success in some sense, indoctrinating these young people to support the Nazis' military aims. Now, let's move on to higher education, which is the universities and its impact. Now, if you look at this photograph over here, what you see is actually you see this female, and she's Sophie Scholl, the part of the White Rose movement that, in some sense, tried to rebel against the Nazi regime, but later on, she and her brother were killed and executed. Now, higher education. Now, a few changes in the nature of higher education and state intervention in universities. But one significant impact was that there was a contraction in numbers of students from 113,000 in 1933 to about 57,000 in 1939, reflecting the Nazis' emphasis to downgrade academic education because the focus was really on military aspect of education. But by 1944, interestingly, the numbers start to rise again. But this was largely due to the increase in female students, okay, and they allow the female students to enter into the universities. And they also begin to realize by 44 that there's a value in specialist education. There is a value whereby some people are taught, certain subjects that have high level relates to science and engineering, because all these subjects will help in the war effort. Now, for the university students, a lot of them were forced to join the Nazi-controlled German Student League, but around 25% seem to have avoided this. And the university students had to attend twice weekly sessions for ideological and fitness training. Now, if you think whether or not this happens in Singapore schools, no, okay, we do not have to attend fitness training. But I must tell you that if you were to go to China, I've seen before that the Chinese students actually go through fitness training in universities, but we don't. But of course, all the boys don't need to go through it because actually all the boys have gone through NS. All right. Now, then of course, they are highly encouraged to take part in sporting activities, and they would score points if they do so. And the university curricula or the curriculum modified in some areas. So in areas like racial, eugenics, medicine, law, and politics, obviously going to be slanted towards Nazi ideology. Now, obviously, certain key ideas in physics were not accepted by the Nazi regime because they were deemed to have Jewish origin. So, for example, Einstein, they rejected Einstein's theory of relativity because Einstein was a Jew. So, you can see in some sense, because of their ideology, they did not become very objective in terms of science, because I think all of us now know that Einstein's theory of relativity is really a theory that is true, and it's what made Einstein extremely famous. Now, scientific research did continue, but really they're geared towards the framework of the 4-year plan. Now, the 4-year plan was basically the idea that Germany, within 4 years, starting from 1936, must be prepared for war. So scientific research was geared towards really war, geared towards rearmament. Now, I think some of you all will be familiar with Sophie Scholl. All right, basically, her White Rose movement distributes pamphlets to condemn the Nazis for their participation in the war. Usually in this lesson, I will let the students watch a short clip, but I don't think I'll do so this time. But what I'll do is that I will leave the link on the Teams, and if you're interested, you can go and watch this short clip. Basically, this short clip shows the trial that took place. It's a movie, and you will see the judge. The judge will be wearing red color, so-called like clothing, and how basically the judge was extremely biased and would condemn Sophie and condemn his brother. And later on, of course, the two of them were executed. Now, what about the teachers? So obviously, the teachers or the teaching profession was reconditioned to, again, align with Nazi ideology. Jewish teachers were banned. Many women teachers left work and returned home, and they returned home, of course, because their job is to basically become mothers and make babies. April 33, the law for restoration of the civil service led to about nearly 1,200 university teachers being dismissed due to racial and political reasons. So if they suspect that you have Jewish blood or something like that, you could be dismissed. So there were a lot of people who were asked to leave university. November 33, all university teachers were made to sign a declaration in supporting Hitler and the Nazi state, and they must join the Lecturers League, the Nazi Lecturers League. And then later on, there's the Nazi Teachers League, okay? And together with the Nazi Lecturers League, they will organize month-long camps to reinforce Nazi values and ideology. So even the teachers were brainwashed, all right, or indoctrinated, okay? So if you look at this photograph here, obviously a Nazi official or teacher is teaching the teachers. There's a map. What do you think the teacher is teaching the teachers? Well, geography, right? Possibly, even informing the teachers that certain lands should belong to Nazi Germany. And really, if you think about reversing the Treaty of Versailles, what it means is that certain lands in Poland, certain lands in Czechoslovakia should return back to Germany. So all indoctrination taking place. Now, local Nazi officials kept records of all individual teachers, and they will track them to see whether or not they're loyal towards the state. So by 36, over 30% of teachers had joined the Nazi party. By 37, almost 90%, all right, which is nearly 100%, has joined the league. Right, and by 38, 2/3 of these teachers have attended these special camps to get indoctrinated. By 38, recruitment of teachers have declined, and there were about 8,000 vacancies, and only 2,500 were coming out of the teacher training college. So what you see is that there are a lot of teachers that are going to be very loyal towards the Nazis, but at the same time, there's a shortage of teachers because the Nazis basically removed teachers that they think that were not loyal. So with the shortage of teachers also could suggest why education standards also in some sense decline. By 39, all teachers had to become or part of the right civil service, and so obviously they need to be loyal towards the Nazi state. Now, and so we come to the end of the lesson. And this, I just want to show you an example of how a question might appear in the exam. Though I must say it's very rare, and it occurred many years ago, about 15 years ago. Examine the role of education in one authoritarian state. So really, the whole idea is that what is the role? What is the purpose of education? Okay, so obviously to instill certain values, Nazi values, and obviously to promote a loyalty towards the state. Then, of course, the big question is that as this education goes into the Nazi society, in the essay, was it effective or was it not effective? And you can also examine the impact. Did it really manage to promote a group of people that's loyal to the Nazi state, or were there some limitations? Also, for this question, you can consider what are some failures in education. For example, the fact that education standards drop because of the fact that there's huge emphasis in military education. So there are many things to talk about, but the key thing really is that how would you organize your essay so that when the marker reads it, every paragraph is clear with good topic sentences, right? So after you finish watching the video, please proceed on to do the MCQ questions, very easy MCQ questions. And then once you have finished doing that, you're done. And you can use the remaining time to do more research on your history IA, so that within the Excel sheet, basically I can see the two sources and the two arguments used to answer your research question. All right. So that's all. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. See you tomorrow. Take care. Bye.